and welcome back to Economics in One Lesson in the 21st Century, the channel where I show you a straightforward way to judge for yourself what other people are saying about economics. This video is the introduction to a short series on insolvency, which is vitally important to understand as it's at the heart of financial crises and some common frauds. The One Lesson is good for examining the causes and consequences of insolvency because it takes full account of debts, which are completely ignored in many approaches to economics. In future videos, we'll look at several aspects of insolvency, including Ponzi schemes, the effects of different responses to insolvency, contagion, and insolvency in the banking sector. Here's a reminder of the One Lesson. To understand economics, look at how each decision or action affects each person's net worth. So, what is insolvency? It's just a technical term for being broke. Specifically, a person is insolvent if their assets aren't enough to pay all of their liabilities. This is a bit more complicated than it sounds at first, because someone might own and owe different types of thing and still be solvent, but we'll explore that further in a separate video. For now, we'll just consider simpler situations. Let's look at an example. Alice and Bob are on a sea voyage on the 31st of December 2019 when their ship is wrecked in a storm. They manage to swim to a nearby desert island with nothing but the clothes they're wearing. They discover that the island has a good supply of fresh water to drink, but no food. Fortunately, there are plenty of fish in the shallow water around the island, and there's enough wood to make a fire. On the next day, the 1st of January 2020, Alice sets out into the shallows to try to catch some fish. Bob just relaxes in the shade of a tree. Later, when Alice shows Bob the 2 fish she's caught, he offers to give her a fish on the 1st of January 2021 if she will give him a fish today. Alice agrees, and both cook and eat their fish. The next day, Alice goes fishing again, and Bob continues to relax. Again, Alice catches 2 fish, and Bob offers to give her a fish a year later if she will give him a fish today. Alice agrees again. This continues for the whole year. Each day, Alice produces 2 fish. She transfers 1 fish to Bob in exchange for Bob creating a new debt of 1 fish owed to her, and both then consume their fish. What happens to Alice's net worth each day? Well, when she produces 2 fish, her net worth increases by 2 fish. When she swaps 1 fish for Bob's new debt of 1 fish, her net worth both decreases by 1 fish and increases by 1 fish, so it doesn't change. Finally, when she consumes 1 fish, her net worth decreases by 1 fish. So over the day, her net worth increases by 1 fish. These actions are repeated each day, and by the end of the year, her net worth, apart from her clothes, is 366 fish. It sounds like she's saved up enough that she doesn't need to work for a year. She could relax, or she could work on some other project, perhaps to make a boat or a fishing net. But can she actually do this? Her savings are in the form of debts owed by Bob. That isn't necessarily a problem. If Bob actually had 366 fish to give her, he could pay her the fish as he promised, and she could eat without having to produce the food herself. The problem is that at the moment Bob doesn't actually have any fish, or any other food for that matter, to give her, and she can't eat the debts. Unless Bob starts actually catching fish, Alice is going to have to keep on fishing herself. Let's look at Bob's net worth to see why Alice's net worth seems misleading. When Alice produced 2 fish, Bob's net worth didn't change. When Bob promised to give Alice a fish a year later in exchange for a fish that day, Bob's net worth both decreased by 1 fish and increased by 1 fish, so again it didn't change. Finally, when Bob consumed the fish, his net worth decreased by 1 fish. So each day, his net worth decreased by 1 fish. These actions are repeated each day, so over the year, his net worth has decreased by 366 fish. At the end of the year, Bob's net worth, apart from his clothes, is minus 366 fish. He has almost no assets, but has a liability of 366 fish. Bob is seriously insolvent, and this is why Alice's net worth is misleading. When a debtor's insolvent, it means that they currently don't have enough net worth to pay everything they've promised to their creditors. In this example, Charlotte's only asset is an apple, but she owes a house to someone. Unless it's a very special apple, she won't be able to use it to pay her debt, so she's insolvent. The rest of the world is expecting to receive an actual house in exchange for writing off the debt, but all that Charlotte can give them at that point is an apple. The net worth of the whole world, including Charlotte, is actually less than the net worth of everyone in the world apart from Charlotte. How can part of the world have a net worth which is more than the whole world's net worth? It's because their net worth includes what they've been promised, but which doesn't currently exist. Charlotte's creditors have a misleading sense of prosperity because Charlotte has made a promise which she can't keep at the moment and may never be able to. As things stand, the rest of the world will eventually have to write off the debt of one house without receiving the promised house in exchange, and their net worth will then drop from a level which reflects their hopes to a level which reflects reality. Being insolvent doesn't necessarily mean that Charlotte's debt won't be paid in full, because she could become solvent again before the debt's due. But there are only two ways this can happen. The first is if there's a transfer of net worth from the rest of the world to Charlotte. This isn't really a solution at all, because the rest of the world is just transferring some of its net worth to Charlotte, in order for it to be transferred back again when the debts are written off. It's just a roundabout way of the rest of the world writing off the debt without receiving the promised payment. The second is if Charlotte continually produces more than she consumes until she's saved enough to pay her debt. If the reason she became insolvent was because she was consistently consuming more than she produced, like Bob on the desert island, she's going to have to adopt a radically more productive or more frugal lifestyle. Here's a question to ponder. Imagine lots of banks were to become insolvent. Why would they ever be bailed out, instead of the debts just being written off? As far as the rest of the world as a group is concerned, the outcome would be the same. Well, consider this. The rest of the world isn't just one big group, it's made up of billions of individual people. Some of them might be owed a lot by the insolvent banks. Those creditors would probably be extremely pleased if lots of everyone else's net worth were transferred to the insolvent banks, allowing the creditors to collect on the portion of the debts which they'd otherwise have to write off without getting anything in return. Exactly the same situation could occur if, say, a Mediterranean nation were to become hopelessly insolvent and its creditors were reluctant to write off all the debts which it owed them. Whether this is what happened in recent history is for other people to discover. I just mention it here as a theoretical possibility to be aware of. So, that's a quick introduction to insolvency and its problems. When a debtor doesn't have enough assets to pay all of their liabilities, the creditors won't be paid everything they're owed because they can't be. Unless the insolvent debtor works their way out of insolvency, then either the creditors will have to write off some of the debts without getting what they were promised, or someone else will end up paying. There's much more to say about insolvency, but I'll leave that to future videos. For now, always remember that it's far easier to make promises than to actually keep them. A quick note to any economists watching. Notice how the one lesson's focus on net worth and balance sheets means that we can study the macroeconomics of a tiny economy. Theories based around prices, supply and demand only work in economies with large numbers of people and transactions, and that makes them far more difficult to reason about, which can easily lead to mistakes, as I hope to convince you in future videos. The applicability of the one lesson to any economy, from a Robinson Crusoe to the whole world, is one of its great strengths. Okay, thanks for watching. If you appreciated this video, please share, like and subscribe. And please leave any comments below if you found it useful or if you have any questions. Thanks to those of you who've subscribed already. I hope you're finding it interesting food for thought, and I appreciate you bearing with me while I try to fit in the time to create new content. I'll see you soon for more economics in one lesson in the 21st century.